everyone. Welcome to Disclosure Now with ARKHEIM Ra and Brian Singh. Soon we're going to be joined by our good friend Dan Armstrong. Dan is going to be talking about his experiences in the secret space programs. Dan was a part of Mars Defense Force, and he has some interesting testimony regarding the Mormon presence in space. So this should be an interesting show. This information has never, I don't think, really been talked about publicly. So welcome to the show, Dan. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you, ARKHEIM. Hey, Brian. Good to see you.
Great to meet you here in person finally, Dan.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad. Yeah. So I'm sorry I just took a minute there. I was just talking to another survivor and former LDS person in the programs. And so, yeah.
So this is something that other people are remembering and realizing in unison?
Yeah, well, I knew another woman. She's been on James Rink's show years ago. She's in Utah and Mormon, and she's an experiencer and also confirms things related to the LDS organization. And yeah, there's quite a few people have come up, but it's there. I'll tell you one thing that the church is good at: public relations. These people are no slouches when it. Oh yeah, the big money. Brian knows it. That's right.
Money, as they say, money talks.
These people, there's so many angles to cover. So there's the SSP aspect, but one of the things I've done is try to bring some things together to you, just different aspects of the church, and also looking at as much as how it's integrated here to our 3D world, because the church is a huge player even outside of things of the SSP. And I think by looking at that, we can understand it's not a big stretch of the imagination that the same relationships would be continuing in off-world enterprises. So that was the approach I thought I would do, because I like to try to bring receipts of. It's not, because it's so hard to beat, for us even in our society, to beat the mind control in entertaining these notions. But you know, you look at people like Catherine Austin Fitz. Catherine brought a lot to explaining how the financing of something like the SSP is done, right? The former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the Bush administration, that's Catherine, right? Big former investment advisor and stuff. And she's looking at it and she's like, well, how much would it cost? And then she saw the amount of money being taken out of misspent money in government through black programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and said, hey, that's exactly what you could do with it. So a lot of people think it's just making people rich, all of the corruption. No, the corruption is going and directly funding things like SSP. Anyhow.
Dan,
yeah.
I was sorry to interrupt, but then I want you to continue whatever you're about to say. I was going to mention, you know, you're talking about the LDS more here in the corporate normal 3D matrix world, and then extending up into the SSP world, and then you've got all these occult connections now in the ritualistic side as well. And I hope we get to delve into that today.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. So it's quite an eclectic group of pictures I've got together. So I'll try to figure out how to share them pretty decently after. But it's a lot of places to begin. But even today, I had a new connection made talking to this person's LDS and an experiencer in all the projects and that. And it was like my dad converted, basically. Okay, so when I was about 8 years old, my dad randomly came across the Mormon missionaries coming by his house, supposedly randomly. And he converted. And then shortly I did after, a few months later, right? The rest of the family. And of course, in retrospect, I don't think it was such a random thing. Like, very few people convert to the church through the missionaries. In fact, the whole missionary program is a weird thing in itself, because they don't get members through proselytizing. The church knows that. The numbers speak for themselves. Most missionaries are lucky if they convert one person in their entire 2-year mission that they do. So that's really not the purpose of the missionary program. first of all, and that lends straight into, of course, the relationship the church has with the intelligence organizations, CIA, FBI, NSA, and so forth. And I have things to demonstrate that today. So there's that whole side of things. Also, you can look at just the church, even in terms of, it's not just that it has a lot of money, it has a lot of financial interest in things like agriculture and land across the world. And this is a very interesting thread to follow too through this whole thing.
And I also know that there's a certain nonprofit hospital corporation, Sutter Health, that apparently is based out of Utah, and the LDS connections. And it seems like it's a nonprofit hospital corporation that began as a real estate entity, and they found out like the tax breaks and buying up hospitals and being a quote unquote nonprofit. And then they morphed into healthcare, and boy, they're a monster out west. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, I believe that. Yeah, they're well, the Mormons are very famous at being excellent at business. This is like these people redefine the Protestant work ethic and the Calvinist way of thinking. You know, that if a man's wealth shows that God has blessed him because he's virtuous, right? That it's a very strong part of the Mormon psyche. And of course, you ascend through the church more if you have wealth. That's a no-brainer. Any case,
that abundance gospel.
Oh yeah. And it's great.
You're speaking to the
capitalism.
And you're speaking to the aspect of the missionaries going around being connected to 3-letter agencies and how they don't convert people, and I find that really interesting. My partner Kat pointed out to me before I even met you and you were talking about this. Apparently, Mormons make excellent FBI agents and CIA agents because they kind of have like this like idea that, like, you know, a lot of ideas like have an idea of like some motherland like Israel or something like that. Well, for the Mormons, the United States is their motherland, and our governance here is like through God and ordained by God. So therefore, if you're receiving orders from the United States government, like to question those orders would be an equivalence to questioning God. Yeah. So they make the perfect assets because they're mind controlled to be perfectly obedient.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big, exactly right. Like, think how hard it is to find some 1950s version of an FBI agent in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. It's hard outside of this kind of culture you have with the Mormons, where people still don't even drink tea or coffee, let alone smoke cigarettes or drink booze or do drugs or anything like that, right? So you got this well-molded character. They also go through 6 weeks of training at the Missionary Training Center in Salt Lake before they're deployed on their missions, where they're taught the foreign languages if they're going to foreign countries where English isn't their language. And there's a lot to be said there because there's a lot can happen in 6 weeks. And they also all go through the temple endowment ceremony, which is only the temples are exclusive to only certain Mormons. Not all Mormons are allowed to go to temples. And you need to renew a license, basically, in order to even go to the temple. Anyhow, that's where they do their Masonic rituals. It's a very Masonic organization. Now, a lot of people would say they're just an offshoot. Joseph Smith stole the rituals, and he did this, that, and the other, which is a valid point of view. And then there's also the fact that I look at these groups, whether it's the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witness, Scientology, etc., I look at them all as franchises of the Illuminati. Okay, these are profit engines of the Illuminati to launder money, to generate money, no different than the Hells Angels, all the biker gangs, all of it. They're all franchise cash machines, right? They're crews like Tony Soprano's.
You bring up the biker gangs. You bring up the biker gangs. Montauk would get kids from them, from biker gangs.
Oh, so you have the different wings, right? So you have bikers for things that are more on the illicit side, kidnapping, getting, kids, sexual, strip clubs, et cetera, et cetera. That side of because remember, the most money is made, the more illegal the thing, the higher the profit margin, right? So of course, you need both the groups that conduct the illegal activities and the groups that are supposed to be regulating the illegal activities part of the same organization, so that the funds are always kicked up.
That's right. Because you got the three pillars of the underground economy is human trafficking, weapons, and drugs. So those are always the top three.
Always. So you have this aspect to it with the Mormons. It's an interesting religion because you have Joseph Smith starting it in New York State. It migrates to the Midwest. At one point, Nauvoo, the city they built, was larger than Chicago at the time. But because Mormons were always persecuted, namely, people didn't like the idea of these polygamists going into their towns and spreading their ideas of sharing wives too nicely. And so they sort of got lynched and moved from like state to state. And eventually that's what got them to go out to Utah. On the way out there, Joseph Smith dies before they go out to Utah, and in Council Bluffs, Iowa, he gets shot. And a new president has to be chosen. It's an interesting point, and I bring this up just so people get some of the church history, because there's a lot of things people can point at. But the interesting thing was they had two people be speakers about who would be the successor, one of his brothers or this other man, Brigham Young. And they say when Brigham Young spoke, his face changed to look like Joseph Smith. In other words, his face shape-shifted to look like Joseph Smith. And that's what had the people choose Brigham Young to be their leader and second prophet of the church. And he's the one, to go to your point about this homeland and everything, he's the one they called the American Moses. He took these group of Israelites into the promised land, into Utah, and built their civilization there. So that's just sort of like to give people a little bit of the background of kind of culture we're dealing with. Pioneers, imagine they were converting people over in England in the 1800s and getting them to come over to the United States and then trek as pioneers across the continent to join this religion and this new promised land, this new Zion that they wanted to build in Utah, right? So that's a bit of the foundation to it. What's interesting is when they build Salt Lake, you'll notice Salt Lake is very unique and it's a very modern city for some reason. One of the primary reasons is they built the streets. Unlike the streets of the time in the late 1800s, before cars, streets were narrow. But do you know what Salt Lake is designed? Big boulevards, insanely large streets for its era. So because they already anticipated cars and traffic before it existed. Same thing happened in the temple in Salt Lake there. They built elevator shafts before the invention of the elevator. They were just told when they designed the temple, you need to keep this big cavity open. Everything was designed, and they kept cavities for things like elevators without even knowing about elevator technology. So you see the whole time component here that we're looking at?
Yeah, the connection to time travel. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's what all these, so what we are kind of like the point that to me we're kind of approaching here, and it's kind of a reiterated point that we approach a lot on this channel, is that the Mormon Church, the LDS Church of Latter-day Saints, seems to be an offshoot component, time corporation connected to the Illuminati, basically. Yeah. And it's just it's the same story. And if you look into the Mormon Church, a lot of the ritual abuse that we see in Catholicism and all these other Abrahamic religions and stuff like that is also there. And once again, I remind people that this isn't some sort of strange accidental byproduct. This is a cornerstone of a underlying religion underneath the surface religion. And they use the surface religion as a front for mind controlling people, is essentially what it is. So,
yeah, very well put. And it's what I always tell people about, when we're talking about the esoteric and the exoteric, the public side and the private side, right? The hidden side. And the same thing happens in these churches, just like in the Catholic Church, right? You have the regular mass for the people, and then you have the black mass in that on the occult side, right? The Babylonian side. Their little rituals that they've been performing for 5,000 years. That's a different Catholic Church than the regular exoteric one. And what they're presenting. The same thing's done in the Mormon Church. And I was even talking with this person earlier today, and I was saying, that not to say that Mormon Church is all a bad thing. I think there's actually been, just like a lot of these churches, there's actually been a struggle of good against evil within these churches, going back and forth over time. I don't think they're just necessarily corrupt and evil. I think there is actually some very noble aspects and even certain presidents of the church, like Spencer W. Kimball in the 1980s, the prophet of the church at the time. I mean, he was into exposing the Illuminati and everything, like and talking about the concern of that in our world and communist takeover of capitalism. Like he was genuinely concerned. He was concerned what he called the Gadianton robbers, which is an allusion to in the Book of Mormon to groups of secret societies that were involved with things like we were talking about bikers and that earlier, and the corruption and how he said the Gadianton robbers had infiltrated the church. This is the prophet of the church at the time. So I think I want to show there's a complex picture here too. We're not looking at a static force. There seems to be this.
Yeah, that's always important to mention. These groups are kind of fluid. They're not like solid. Like even if you look at the polar opposite of, and if you look at Satanism, you have LaVeyan Satanism, which, somebody like Michael Aquino was not a fan of the LaVeyan Satanists because he said they were just card carrying. They like to pull it out at cocktail parties and kind of like, oh, I'm a Satanist, and it was all about their image to them, and they didn't actually worship Satan. And so he went out and found Satan and started this church for the actual deity, which he called Set. He said that was the true name of Satan. And then you also just have, like, because it's a thing in popular culture, you have people like heavy metal and stuff like that who wear a lot of the imagery and the symbols and stuff like that and use it, and they might not fully understand it, and they look at it all very hypothetically. And these are not necessarily bad people who are using these images and stuff like that to express themselves through their art. And it's kind of like the same thing with the Mormon Church, where there are a lot of people who are genuinely just using this as a vehicle to worship God. And you might not agree with every single aspect of it, but, that can be harmless in itself. But unfortunately, because what happens with these organized groups is they oftentimes, almost always, get infiltrated to be used as a vehicle for evil. And I think that's what these Illuminati groups have become really good at, is they've become masters of infiltrating groups and appearing to be as the saviors of said groups while they're the ones who are destroying them, that kind of thing. That makes any sense.
Yeah, and that's the complicated thing even too with Freemasonry, right? So of course that's doing a lot of the SRA, a lot of the corruption and problems we see are done through that. But then there's also the arguments that, actually was more of a benevolent force at one point that got corrupted by these groups. Mm-hmm. And has been overtaken through these mm-hmm. groups and modeled and everything else after. So it's
a chicken and egg kind of thing. It's like, what came first? The corruption? Was it always corrupt, or did it get infiltrated? And yeah. I guess that's, I guess that's important, but it also could be considered hearsay. The more important thing is the fact that these groups are infiltrated, and it's important to recognize that, but recognize that there are normal everyday people within these groups. So that doesn't mean that it's just some monolith force of just evil people that are all part of some blood.
Absolutely not.
Like that. That's not what it is. There's a lot of normal people that are part of this that are just trying to live their lives and live by a good moral code that makes them feel sound within their communities. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, that's definitely extremely important to bring up when we talk about these things, because I always think that the problem with religions and ideologies is like there can be such a beautiful thing. I find them fascinating to learn about, And I think that every single ideology out there in its own unique way can kind of add to the world. But it's when these ideologies are taken to the extreme and people act as if they're the only source of truth or the only source of knowledge or wisdom that matters and should be allowed to exist. It's when those ideologies are pushed to that extreme where they become dangerous. And I think it's kind of this weird. It's like a kind of like a dance we have to play all the time where we allow people their religious freedom and stuff like that, and we also, while doing that, also make sure to not allow dangerous ideologies to spread. And you'll
Well,
see with,
and you know what one of those ideologies is? It isn't even these extreme examples thing, but let's take precepts like are in the Mormon Church. The church is true, the people are not. That's a famous maxim in the Mormon Church. It's a great way of saying the church is always right. It's just that there's flawed people in the church. And it's really dangerous because what it allows is people to hide behind the infallibility of the church and to protect the reputation of the church and protect people who are harming people. Like the amount of sexual abuse in the Mormon Church is insane. It's off the charts. And we're not just talking random people. We're talking it's very organized in some of the in what they call wards. It's like the parishes. It's done by the actual presiding ruling group of that parish, and then they're protected. So that's where things like the infallibility of the church become a very dangerous doctrine, right? Because it starts just like in the case of the Catholic Church, right? It's like, well, we got to protect all these horrible priests because, and becomes this game of like moral, like, oh, moral, you know,
this is where
like,
this comes
oh,
in.
but we help so many people, and if we let these lies be exposed, then maybe good people will suffer because we're exposing the lies. And oh, this fucking not sorry, but it makes me so angry, you know, that this is how this type of moral accounting that's just so flawed.
Yeah, that's how they get away with it, is they're able to hide behind having to protect the religion and protect the image of the faith.
Right. And the Mormons are famous time and time again of back flip-flopping on issues. Like let's get some things thrown out in the just to see a bit about this organization, okay? Understand that it's not until 1980 that men of color are allowed to enter the priesthood in the Mormon Church. Like they'd be a lower priest, but not higher one, like what they have the Aaronic and Melchizedek. They could not go into the temple. If you were black and you were Mormon until in 1979, you still could not do those functions because they still held the concept, and it goes back to the Mormon scriptures of saying that the skin of blackness came upon people because of their wickedness, and God cursed them.
Yeah, which kind of goes back to the fact that they believe that the United States is supposed to be a sort of bastion of white supremacy. Like it's not just like there's more than an implicit like race kind of baiting thing going on there within the Mormon faith.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they're the German resonance is very strong. Like the whole idea of this, you know, Ubersmensch, you know, like the blonde hair to the side with the piercing blue eyes and, you know, farmer's build kind of guy. Like, look at the missionaries. I mean, they're great advertisements for the church. All these, you know, Idaho and Iowa farm boys and stuff going out there when they're 19, 20 years old. You know, they look so wholesome. It's such a great image. And they're great people. I think these people do it voluntarily. You know, the church doesn't even pay them. They have to pay for them all out of their own pocket. The church doesn't pay a dime towards it. They ask for 10% of your income for the rest of your life, for your whole life. Even if you're a child, your birthday money, they want that. Like,
That's crazy.
But you know, you gotta like everybody does everything on a volunteer basis in the church, except for like the top people who get a salary in that, right? So, I mean, I had a graphic here. It was interesting, just like, but let me just show you just so you see a picture of the lovely person that we're talking about. This is one of the people that I believe I was involved with in the Mormon Church, and it's a former president of the church. What are the screen sharing options
So
here?
it should be present.
Okay. Oh, slides. I could do slides. Maybe I should organize it. I'm just gonna. Let's see. It's sort of weird collection of pictures I have here, but I'll start with these ones.
And full disclosure, one of my housemates and business partners, he's African American, and he was adopted by more white Mormons who were relatively high up in the Mormon Church, and he makes a secret of this, and he and I we talk about this a bit. So there's a lot of what you're saying absolutely hits home.
Yeah, we almost had him on the show, right? Like he probably could have.
He's coming. He's got we can do whole shows around Jaden like for a year. Seriously. He will be on our show and everyone else's after he's first on Robert Khalil's super famous Typical Skeptic podcast. He's going to be on that one first, and then the doors will be wide open for the rest of us.
So are you guys seeing this photo?
Not yet. You need to give them screen sharing.
I don't know why I always have to
Be careful if you've eaten in the last 20 minutes, you might throw up. No, it's not that bad. But...
Yeah, I don't know why it's not allowing you to share. Like, is it supposed to be like? Is it showing you that it's sharing?
It says to me, StreamYard is sharing a window, and then it says stop sharing or hide.
Oh, no, then for you, Dan, you need to change the tab to the tab that you want to present.
Oh,
maybe.
Okay. Wait a second.
And
you it's showing with me what I'm trying to present.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the right one. Okay. And it says stop screen and edit name. This is very.
Maybe you want to try stop screen sharing and then try it again.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do that. I just feel like I'm going to get a little bit of extra challenge in trying to share some of this stuff today.
Check out the chat real quick here. By the way, everybody, I sometimes tune out the chat because I can't concentrate on two things at once. And then I'll come back and read your comments. So I don't mean to be rude with that, guys. I do care about what you're all saying, but
I'll go ahead and start modding it.
And this is great. We'll take this opportunity to look at the comments. Trays, myths, and tunes. My grandfather was a 33rd degree Freemason. My only sibling, whose spare room I'm visiting, thinks psychics are fake and cannot grasp empathy. Quite sad. The 3D normies conditioning so unreal. Yet norm. Yeah, that's the thing.
We got your screen here. All right.
Okay. So this is
creepy.
This is a picture of a photo of Thomas S. Monson at a temple dedication ceremony. I chose this one because it really emphasizes the Masonic side to the church. He's got his trowel and tool there for the laying of the cornerstone of one of the temples. And he's the one that I believe is, well, I'm going to show a bit more and you can see. Keep going through one by one. It's easier.
Are you trying to say, Dan, if we were going to use a vampire analogy, he'd be the head vampire?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is for entertainment purposes only, everybody. Just going to say that right
now.
Of
course.
That's always a thing to say on YouTube.
For all the algorithms. We're massaging the algorithms. Oh, so good. Shatsu.
Exactly. So here's the next one of him. This gives you a little bit, because you can see sometimes you don't get it in one photo, but you'll get it in others, right?
He also had the black and white colors, the checkerboard thing going there in the previous photo.
So let me, sorry, this is just so clunky the way it's going. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to point out too, I guess I can just point it out while you're getting that opened up. It's like when it comes to the church, and this applies to so many things. Like when it comes to like your whatever faith it is you practice, or whatever modal you use to practice your spirituality or whatever. We have this thing in us as humans where we have worship programming installed into us, to where we want to worship a deity, we want to worship an idol, we want to give our power to something. And now that we're growing up a bit and able to self-reflect and look at ourselves more like we are now, I think it's important to evaluate that trait that we have and how detrimental it can be to us, and the fact that like the church is trying to instill that in people. And then we also sometimes will see that with political figures and stuff like that. And if we took that worship, that hero worship programming, that deity worship programming that we had out of the equation, perhaps we'd be a little bit better at holding these institutions accountable. I think it's important to hold your leaders accountable, and that means that if they fuck up, you say, "Hey, you're fucking up. Hey, like you got to do a better job." But if they're like the holy person who rode in from a cloud that God Himself sent down or whatever, and they can do no wrong, it's very, very hard to hold those people accountable. And I think that's where the danger in like really any institution lies, is when people get those rose-colored glasses and they look at the leaders as like infallible. That's a big part of the problem.
So here's another one of Thomas S. Monson. I'll just show a couple of him with some presidents as well. Anyhow, I don't want to get. I'm sorry if I don't want the pictures to take in the way. Is it showing it though?
It's not showing yet.
No way. That's fun.
Oh wait. I know what I gotta do. Wait, no, yeah, I don't see it. No.
I did have it, and now I have to do it again. 1 second here. It's being super annoying. I haven't used StreamYard to do this kind of thing before. So there, it should work now.
Okay,
Is that one coming in?
Yep.
So there's another one you can see of him. So yeah, this is the person that I saw with Donald Rumsfeld on Mars.
Okay.
Just to sort of give the significance of what's going on there.
All right, so now we need to rewind.
Yeah, you just went to light speed there, buddy. You dropped a big one. You had me at Mars, Donald Rumsfeld.
If we can go back a little bit, we can explain where these memories come from. Just start from the beginning.
Sure.
We've kind of gone into the church and the mind control aspect and the don't question orders part, which I think is definitely going to play into this whole connection to the secret space programs. But yeah, why don't you tell us your story?
All right. Yeah. So I'll sort of, it'll be a little non-linear. I'll do it as I sort of remember, and then how I pieced it together is maybe makes the most sense. So when I was living in South Korea in like 2005 or so, 2005, 2006, I was living next to in the middle of Seoul. And in the middle of Seoul, there's still the former US Army base at that time, their main one, largest one in Asia Pacific, 30,000 soldiers on that base. So it's a city within the city, and it's American soil within the city from the Korean War times. And I lived up a big hill, a residential neighborhood is all Korean next to that. And I could see right into the base from my hill. And I mean, to the point you can hear the bugle going off in the morning and everything. It's that close, right? When I go to my subway station, there's American soldiers there because of security reasons. They need to be ready in case people come out of the station for the wrong reason. So I was living there, I was teaching English and that, and I go on the weekends. There's like that whole area that all the U.S. soldiers go off base, and that's where they go to drink and party and all that kind of shit. So you can imagine it's a pretty wild neighborhood. You got Koreans, U.S. military personnel. It had a huge Muslim, the whole Muslim Korea population of Korea was there. So there was like a mosque and everything. They had Hooker Hill, and then they had Homo Hill, and I'd be going to the latter one, and it's just wild. Like imagine like almost sort of Vietnam era throwback where girls are just coming right off of door hinges and they're on the door frame and like, hello, come on inside, and it's just stuff like this. And you're walking there and you're like, no, not my cup of tea. I'm going up the hill here. Anyhow, I lived like that. And so I was sleeping. This is just a recall I had was, it was a 3-part one, and I tell people a bit more in detail in other ones. But essentially, I was on a transport in Mars at one of the sequences talking to someone. I was talking about all my SSP missions with them. And I sort of got told off by this guy because I was talking about all these missions. And I guess this is frowned upon because it's classified and you're not supposed to be talking about what you can remember and da-da-da-da-da. And the next sequence, it was in battle, and we were fighting, I know it sounds ridiculous, but giant spiders, giant telepathic spiders, 12 feet, 12 feet tall.
That does not sound ridiculous. I can't. You're like the 4th, 5th, or person with the Mars testimony with giant spiders.
Yeah, we've had
I
on our show. We've had Andrew Basiago.
Susan Long has been stung by one and recalls that.
We've had John Whitberg remembers them. I mean, everybody remembers the spiders. I remember the spiders. Man. Yeah. So.
And you remember what they sound like when they're hurt. Like it's a horrible sound. Like the sound, the screeching that I was just like, oh. And it's also like psychically combined as well. So you're not just like, it's not just hearing it. There's a whole other component. I think, because I talked with another person before, and she said, a lot of people just talk about those things as rail guns and that. I think there's actually, and this is my sense of it too, even at the time without being told, but there's actually psychic energy that's also being mixed in with that projectile. That is not pure physical matter that they're working with as a weapon. They're actually using our chi and weaponizing our chi. And that's the secret weapon that they're using. So there's a whole other aspect, because I think a lot of times people just look at it as very Star Wars-ish. It's just lasers and stuff. But there's a very spiritual element to why particular people are being taken as well.
Oh, yeah.
That gets into the Kyber crystals and the Force. And apparently in the Orion Wars, lightsabers and kyber crystals are a thing. And there are even kyber blasters, where instead of a lightsaber, it's a crystal, and they're supposedly paired with the energy of the user. And not everyone can use that weaponry. Yeah,
exactly. So,
and I know it sounds very like it fell out of like I sound like a Star Wars geek nerd, but apparently that's the way there's mirrors to reality.
Yeah,
there are quite a few.
And I remember I really was disgusted with myself doing it. I did not like doing it. Like I was just remember, this is disgusting. This is a mess. This shouldn't be happening. But it was also it's me or them kind of thing, and you realize that as you're.
I gotta ask you, were you finding that you were more tasked with hunting down ant people, and then you were encountering the spiders off of that because the ant people were telepathically summoning the spiders as protection?
Because they're kind of like their dogs, like
right. Or were you just tasked, just go get spiders, and the ant people weren't in the picture at that point?
There's not much I remember from it, right? It's just like very fast fragments, lots of detail from the fragment, but very fragmented. So I don't remember the part with the ants, but I know that's a part of
our memory will comes back.
But that's why it's good that we all bring all of our data points to the table, because then we're filling in more and more of the puzzle as we go through, right? And that's what I'm big on, is data points. So I just try to remember what my actual testimony is. Don't embellish anything. Always tell people
remember
why you're speculating or it's theoretical. Like never use that as fact. Like I think there's rules that we can use for disclosure so that we get a better quality disclosure coming out that's more credible. This is important to me too.
Do you remember at all why? I mean, I know why. Like, so it's kind of like asking a question I know the answer to, but I'm just curious if you remember why you were fighting Lynn.
I felt like we were basically mercenaries trying to clear it out because we were taking over indigenous habitat.
Yeah.
That was clear. I mean, I know it was a colonizing force.
Yeah.
We were part of.
That's why we did the show. That's why we did the show. That
It's
was
not like we were there guarding our crops or
genocide,
something.
and that was
we're
wrong.
just trying
What
to
we did
defend
was
the
wrong.
farm. Like,
What we did was wrong. It was genocide.
and I knew it was wrong as I was doing it. It was genocide. It was going in to dominate a space, to take over a space, to colonize a space. And I knew it was wrong, that these things had every single right to be there. And
Yeah,
that's why I was not happy with myself for doing it. Like, I was very disgusted.
Yeah. I remember one of the ants being on top of me and asking me, like, why are you doing this? Like, why'd you have to come here? Like, why? Why our home? Like, they think we're nuts.
Yeah.
We are nuts. They're right.
But, it's weird because we got all this prehistory with Mars and everything else, right? Like, a lot of us came through Mars. I think there's a reason why some of us are specific Mars candidates. I think we were actually some of the original seeds that came through the Mars transit to get to Earth. There's so much when you really keep digging to uncover from this, right? The whole thing about Adam, like if you get into Pierre Sabak and he's talking about everything, you'll realize, like, he says basically, like, Mars, Adam clearly came from Mars. There was these whole things about the flood and the deluge. It's not like an event that happened once. These are traumatic events that happen over and over and over and over and cycle through time. And they have for thousands of aeons across the galaxy. And they've also occurred here on Earth multiple times. And we were put on arcs and we were sent to the moon from Mars and then altered to be able to be put and bring onto the portal to come here to the Earth, right? Like there's so many different backstories to it all, but I know it was wrong what we were doing, and I know it was just this very military, like I said, mercenary type of operation. This isn't just a military operation. This is a mercenary operation for some kind of corporate interests. And because the third sequence, I end up at the PX, the commissary, right? And it's a sort of open. It's not like there's no walls or anything. Where it's like a campment, and you can go, and they got a food serving area and like gift shop, and like you can buy various things, right? This is where the soldiers can spend their money. And that's where I remember I was pissed off because they were charging too much for a burger. And it's so funny, like that's the thing I remember. I got my Asian side to me, I lived there so long. I'm like, what do you mean $20 for a burger? It's too much money. It's too much money. That's my balls to pay $20 for a burger. I was pissed about it. And then I looked and I saw Donald. That's when I saw like Donald Rumsfeld and Thomas S. Monson, that guy that I showed you earlier. And Donald Rumsfeld was Secretary of Defense at that time during the George W. Bush administration. And they're talking to each other. And it's not like they're hiding that they're talking to each other. It was just very matter-of-factly. And we're not even really supposed to know who they are, let alone pay attention to them or anything. And I just remember thinking, that's fucked up, right? Like, I didn't know anything about SSP or anything like this. This is way back in 2005. It's pre-YouTube and everything, right? And yeah, and before I left, I think I mentioned this before with you. I had there was this multi-dimensional object that you could buy, and it had the memory of your mission, and you could buy it if you wanted. And then the guy from the first sequence yelled at me again for wanting to buy such a thing, because I was interested in keeping this memory. And I guess I did buy it because I'm remembering and telling you the story now. So there's there's weird shit going on up there, but that to me tells me that there's a huge component of the LDS church that goes straight to the actual corporation of the president, which is where all the finances are controlled through this secret company, the corporation of the president, right? It's one of 3 corporation souls in the world, I think, or very few. It's like the Queen of England and the Pope and the president of the Mormon Church have a corporation soul in this particular structure, where you're the only member of the corporation. So you're the president, secretary, everything. You're the exclusive shareholder, and it is a corporation that exists in perpetuity and can be passed down to the next title holder of that office. That's a corporation soul, and that's what governs the finances of the church, and is the holdings of the entire church itself.
So Dan, for that particular recall, you're on Mars. You're part of this forced colonization effort. Your memories are being wiped. You don't like it. You're getting ripped off at the commissary, the PX. It's kind of an open air setting there on Mars, right? And other people have testified to being like just out about on Mars. It's not like the movie Total Recall. You go out and you turn into claymation and your head explodes.
No.
You know, and and in that particular situation, there's a PX, there's a more military people, and then here's Donald Rumsfeld and this person with the LDS, the leadership, and they're just speaking there. What do you suppose, an LDS leader was doing there, speaking to Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld at the time?
I believe that particular leader is at minimum a hybrid, if not was a full reptilian. That's the simple and short of the story. And I believe that Donald Rumsfeld was using these assets for them. I believe that it was the reptilians that were wanting to colonize this space. This wasn't even about humans. This was a reptilian operation against their adversary, and they needed us to help clear their adversary. And it was this particular special weapon that I'm talking about in weaponizing our psychic energy in order to be able to get this traditional enemy, this whatever enemy of the reptilians.
So do you think that with like traditional energy weapons, like with just like a laser gun as compared to a rail gun, that kind of apparently
it wouldn't have been as effective?
It wouldn't have been as effective?
No. I think it may have had a combination of the two, but it was almost like the railgun was one thing, but then that would be like the extra piercing, like, I don't even know things. I'm blanked on a lot of my knowledge on these things, of course, but it almost like it was a payload within the projectile.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You use the original projectile, and then you use that as the detonation.
I think that was
through the arm.
That they needed that extra psychic energy within the blast.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I remember it was like a fire. It was like a plasma fire, and it burned. The thing was, it burned them. There wasn't much that could stop these spiders. And
because they're armored. Why?
Yeah.
What was it?
Yeah, I don't know. It was just like that.
Yeah, they're hard.
Keep on coming, and it's nothing slowed them down. Is the whole problem?
So is it like Starship Troopers?
Bullets at these things, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's ineffective. You know.
Was it like Starship Troopers, where they're just getting mobbed by like the bugs?
Yeah, it's like it, these were larger, and they were more like purpley blue. And I remember the energy we were shooting was this blue energy at them. It was like this blue plasma. It was like, when you really think about it, it looks like the same shit that's going out at the Emperor Palpatine's hands is what it's looking like.
Okay, look like plasma energy.
But
fire,
it was like
lightning.
there was like this conversion thing like on the backpack. So there was like this thing of like you were spraying it like a flamethrower kind of thing. It was like this weird, I don't know, like I think there was a combination of the different technologies, probably something to enhance the psychic ability, as well as a conventional type of weapon.
So you're throwing a stream of this stuff around because it's like you're hosing down this enemy of a horde of bugs as they're coming at you.
Yeah,
and they're nasty.
Yeah, and it's like you better destroy them fast, because they just walk. They go so fast, right? Like the only thing you can do is create a wall between you and them. Right.
And then my understanding with like the Draco reptilians is it's not like they couldn't necessarily do it themselves, right? It's they prefer to use the species that they enslave and exploit to do their dirty work. Yeah. Why get their hands dirty when they could have the slaves get better at the killing in the process?
You ever watch Generation 1 Transformers? How often I never understood that as a kid. I'm like, these Decepticons, they're so powerful. And every chance they get, they're always trying to turn humans into slaves to like get their energon cubes or whatever, right? Like they're just standing there with a whip, giant ass Decepticon. Get more, work faster, slaves. We need more energon. And it's sort of that same type of thinking that these reptilians have. Like it's beneath them to do
Or the
that.
Anunnaki.
Like, you know, you wouldn't. It's like cleaning your own toilet. Oh, why would I do that? Like I'll get somebody else to do that kind of shit. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I think like with Utah, like there's so much with that. Like there's so many accounts of people have encountered, like there's tunnels down there. Like when they built that fancy $2 billion shopping mall in Salt Lake with the church's money, that they $2 billion shopping mall. Goes, and then the same guy I showed you the picture of goes, the ribbon cutting ceremonies goes, 3, 2, 1, let's go shopping. Sorry, but I try to bring some humor to it at times. It's pretty sad. But yeah, there's a lot of sexual abuse in it. That is part of it. I wanted to bring something else to you here because I think I like building concepts. And one of them that's really interesting is the altar. So this is inside the temple. I'm going to try to see if I can share this screen.
Now, which temple? Is this the Crystal Palace one?
Yeah, I'm going to show that one too in Washington, and I want to show how
Cathedral,
close it is to. Okay.
And meanwhile, people, if anyone watching, if you're going to have questions towards the end of our show, I'm sure now's a good time to start throwing them into chat. We got time, but I just want to. This is an amazing interview, and just this tie-in. This is a nice surprise for today's show for me.
Oh, cool! I'm glad you like Brian. So you see in the middle here. So this is in the temple. So this is where they're doing. You have to have the special recommend of the parish priest called the bishop to go in, which means you have to be a good Mormon. You have to pay your tithing and promise that you're not smoking or swearing or watching pornography and da 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 da. Anyhow, you see there's these chairs here, and this is one of the rooms where they do these Masonic dramatic plays in order to explain their cosmology to each other. And it's where they do all their Masonic rituals, and you got to promise that you'll keep it secret lest your eyes be pecked out with birds and your gallbladder torn into 1,000 pieces and things like that. That's actually still part that they've modified the wording, but they still do that. But you see in the center here, there's an altar.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to think for a second. Listen to that word. There's an altar.
Yeah.
What gets put on altars? Sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
Now think of altars in the programs.
Yeah. No, I've talked about this before. Yeah.
It's really interesting, that particular setup there. I know at the UN, apparently the special put in by Lucis Trust and Friends, they have like a special prayer room at the United Nations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be like the altar is supposed to be just like a stone, like a cube,
Mm-hmm.
and it almost looks like a similar setup is like you've got this altar where you could like more of a platform that you could put things on top of in the center of the room as a center of attention. And that seems to be a very ritualistic type of setup there for worship.
Well, and they do a lot of mirror magic in their things too. So I was in the Washington temple, the one that you call the Crystal Cathedral one. Let me show that one for reference for people here. This one is 7 stories of Tennessee alabaster marble set with gold-plated, 24-karat gold-plated spires.
And when you say mirror magic, mirrors can be used as portals and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that wall, theoretically, with a mirror, you could easily use that as a portal to go places or access things.
Absolutely. I in this temple, so I went to this one because back in the day they had very few temples. So we drove down from southern Ontario, Canada, where I'm from, down to Washington. It takes about 12 hours. And my family got married, like my dad and mom, and then us as the kids got
It's a beautiful building.
gorgeous.
Is that the Angel Moroni up
That's
top
right,
there?
Moroni. Yeah.
Moroni. Okay.
Yeah.
Moroni.
And you'll
Moroni.
see, I have some other pictures of it, but it almost looks like a ship. You can see that it's a very strong correlation to a ship with it. A beautiful, absolutely gorgeous building. They would put these lights on it at night, and as you come in through the Washington Beltway, it sort of comes and emerges out of the trees like it's this giant glowing ship. And it was such a distraction that they actually had to tell them to turn down the lights on it because it caused a lot of accidents along the Beltway. So yeah, that's that.
So that's pretty intense.
And so this is Washington State because
No, Washington D.C.
D.C. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other thing that's interesting in with that, so I wanted to show just to look at more of the 3D correlations. Okay. It is just north of Washington, D.C. If you look at D.C. as sort of like a diamond, it's at the top tip of the diamond. And
Right. And a lot of people who follow our show, I'm sure, are familiar with a totally Freemasonic layout of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I
among
have
other
some
places.
pictures to support that here too. But let me show this one here. This is an interesting Google Earth thing to show a comparison. I believe that there was something related to this as well. I'm not sure because I think there was a lot of time displacement when we were in this temple. When we were kids, it takes about 6 hours for my parents to do the whole thing. We were put in a playroom for a number of hours. But if you look at this, you'll see something interesting. So the Washington, D.C. temple that is there, can you see it? This map?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you'll notice if you follow the yellow line, less than 3 kilometers away, if you draw a direct line, is Walter Reed National Medical Military Center.
That's a pretty interesting coincidence right there.
Yeah, which is, of course, the Navy's premier hospital.
Right.
There's other ones. It's exactly 10 kilometers to CIA headquarters at Langley. What are some other things here? I just wanted to go through it just so people can
make
get
sense. It makes
feel.
sense when they're all friends for them to be all situated together like that, like it's a friendly little neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Even this, I have I sort of have this. I discovered years ago this sort of remote viewing skill where I can use Google Earth and I can do some pretty interesting things in terms of finding things. And I found this in itself interesting before going into Washington proper. If you look, there's the Washington, D.C. temple.
Oh, we can't see your screen yet. Yep, now we can. Okay.
Okay. There's the Washington, D.C. temple at the top. And you can see the perimeter of D.C., the square, the diamond. And look at, there's this continuous forest area that goes all the way from there, all the way deep into the center of Washington, D.C., which I found interesting in itself because to me, usually protected woodland areas and things like that, especially in urban areas, are usually covers for underground facilities. So I think there is a lot going on in that particular area. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but it sort of drew itself out to me.
I mean, that's not a stretch at all. I mean, Washington, D.C. and that area and just all the above ground entities and organizations you mentioned right there. Would we be surprised if they had anything underground? Of course not.
Yeah, exactly. Like, look at this one, for example. And I mean, I don't want to distract from the Mormon stuff for a bit, but I mean, wait, I won't use that one. Let me see. For example, going back to our Freemasons for a moment, because people say, oh, Washington, D.C. Freemasons, but really when you start looking at this, for example, I don't know if you know about the Egyptian Royal Mile, but an Egyptian Royal Mile is 1.8 kilometers. And you can see, of course, all of the pentagrams and everything in the street layouts here. But if you go exactly one Egyptian Royal Mile from the White House north, you end up at the Scottish Rite Supreme headquarters of the world.
Yes, and that's like one of their true spiritual headquarters to the Illuminati.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just because, you know, it's I think that it's very pertinent. They chose Washington for a reason. They chose all of this for a reason. There's no mistakes going on there. Where's the Supreme headquarters? Yeah, here's the Supreme headquarters. And you'll see too, of course, that the Supreme headquarters looks like, if you know your stuff, it looks like the Knights Templar church in London, which is really the whole founding of the financial empire and that. So that's the Supreme headquarters there.
Looks like a giant mausoleum.
Yep, you're right. It was actually modeled after the mausoleum of, was it somebody Hernassus, Abi Hernassus? But yes, precisely.
Okay. That's why it looks like a mausoleum. Okay.
Yeah. Anyhow, that's just a bit of that stuff. But you guys like interject wherever. I just have these different things. But one of the things I want to throw in, and just to demonstrate the side of the intelligence aspect. Okay, so the largest data center in the United States for the collection of all information on U.S. citizens just so happens to be in Bluffdale, Utah, outside of Salt Lake. And that center, here, I had some better stuff, but I don't know what happened to it. So just give me a sec.
Well, while you're pulling that up, go ahead, Dan. We'll look at the comment section here. I know Trey says, speaking of remote viewing, I just watched a video on Archive that's pulled from here where 4 remote viewers remote viewed the forced reincarnation system. I know Farsight Institute, they've looked at the whole death trap, soul trap system as well, if it was them or a different group. Let's see. Oh yeah, Tennessee, Kentucky, Bigfoot, Ziggy Stardust, Spiders from Mars, right? We've talked about that in other shows. David Bowie was part of the secret space programs. I've heard from multiple people, including like John Whitberg. I don't know, do you have any recall of David Bowie?
Oh, I listened to that album a lot after, and ironically, I never heard it for years until recently after all this SSP stuff. I was very sheltered as a Mormon kid about which music I could listen to and that. But yeah, I think Bowie knew exactly what he was talking about, and this wasn't just some guy on acid coming up with some crazy stuff.
He's a general for Mars Defense Force, and he's a huge part of the Breakaway Colonies. He's a military leader. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised because I do know from my other recalls, like a lot of these people, these celebrity people, are involved, right? Like it's really great because part of it just makes it so easy to say people are completely insane the second they would go and report something, because you're like, oh right,
sure, you saw Tom Cruise, Tom Cruise
and Angelina Jolie,
Kevin Spacey,
the
Queen of England,
people, right?
George Bush Sr.,
Hillary Clinton, sure, okay, yeah.
But yeah, the reality is sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
I
they
don't know
not like us.
where
No.
you want to go with it. I think, did I shut that picture down?
Yeah, you did. You only had it open for a second.
Oh, for a second. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's a lot to the data center. It's huge. Basically, it's the world's like besides the Chinese and that it's the largest center. And this is a good graphic to basically explain it. They're trying to talk about why it's really not so bad. But this gives you the picture of what that data center does here. Now, yeah. Oh, look at that. Isn't that nice? Look.
Oh, it hasn't popped up. Oh, here we go. Okay. Is this the NSA Utah data center?
Yeah.
Okay, that's right, because they have a big
With
data
the
center.
zettabytes of data. Zettabytes.
Yeah, and it's all in that one building.
Yep.
And it's a big cube.
Yeah.
Like a Saturnian cube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is in the Utah data center. Yeah. So this is the one that I showed the picture of briefly earlier. And that's a basic graphic. This is just for like public consumption that they have. But you see as well. So what I want to tie in as well. Okay. So look at all the different threads. Each little piece is not so significant, but when you start tying them together, you see a lot more. For example, do you know who has the world's largest genealogical database? Do you know what I mean with genealogical, like family history, right?
Your
Who has
DNA.
the world's largest genealogical database? The Mormon Church. They are the experts in birth, death, and civil records in the world. They have it, all these things on microfiche. They encourage the church members to do their own family history so that they can get more data. And they also, in those temples, it's weird, like part of what they do is they believe you have to go through these different steps in a physical body. And if you don't, even if you become a Mormon convert in the afterlife, it doesn't work because you need to have it physically done in the physical. So they get people to do these rituals on behalf of dead people in the temple. And that's
So
why
they're incurring. These are soul contracts now. They're dealing with reincarnation cycles and all that.
And they're processing them all in this temple. They're baptizing everybody who ever lived. They're baptizing them in these temples, getting people to volunteer. I've had it. You're getting volunteer for people who are dead if they decided to become a convert to the church. Yeah.
So you're keeping them in this incarnational trap.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for people in our audience, like if you do a QHHT hypnosis session, a lot of them involves clearing of soul ties and contracts and bonds, not just from this life, but from past lives. And then here's Dan filling us in that you've got these people who are trying to subvert that free will cycle by saying, well, if you sign up when you were alive and now that you're gone, we'll have volunteers renew that for you free of charge.
They say the spirit has to accept it and that they're not doing it if they don't want it. But they got in big trouble with Jewish groups years ago over this. So imagine you have people who are like, their family were like, they died in the Holocaust and they're baptizing them in the Mormon temples and they find out about this. Like, what the hell is this?
And they never consented, but that they never were a convert to the church. And so there's some cases where they're doing it for people who did convert into the church, and that's one thing, and then they're doing it for masses of all of us who never
so it is for regular people aren't baptized in the temple. That's done in the regular churches. So only these higher end things doing the things for the dead, and also for them to do these things that are related to time happen in the temple, if you want to look at it that way. And the mirrors and the mirror magic, everything that goes on it. I think I don't know. It's they even had a stake in 23andMe at one point. So they were going
of course
everything else as well.
Because I mean, and that's going to be a mutual stake, because not only are they going to get the data from 23andMe, 23andMe gets data from them, and then that's owned by like BlackRock or Vanguard and the
And they were matching it
Rothschilds.
with their genealogical records, right?
Just what
So
they
what are you
want.
also able to do? You're able to detect bloodlines better. You're able to know who's coming in better with all of this data, right?
Yeah, if you're running super soldier programs and you're trying to get
it's really
incarnated.
useful to have all this knowledge. Oh, you're from. Oh, I see your ancestors were. Da, 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 da. Oh, okay, very nice, right?
So you're talking about on Rob's show when you kind of briefly brought this up on Typical Skeptic podcast, which kind of inspired us to get here in the first place and have this conversation. You talked a little bit about the television show The Expanse, which I unfortunately I haven't had the pleasure of watching it myself, but
That's a good
I was wondering if you kind of go in a little bit of like some of the parallels that you saw between like The Expanse and maybe like some of the stuff that you experienced in this strange like Mormon Secret Space Program stuff. Like maybe you don't have super duper clear memories, but I remember you saying that you truly believe there was a connection and that they were portraying reality. I was wondering if maybe you could just like elaborate a little bit on that.
Exactly. So for sure, and I do have some things. So thank you for bringing that up. That's awesome, because there's just so many threads with this. I'm sorry if it seems a bit all over the place at times.
Yeah.
I was a teacher, so I would really pride myself on a proper presentation. So,
Well, while you're pulling that up, real quick, because you mentioned The Expanse, I know John Whitberg. Oh yeah, that's right. That's a big part of The Expanse. Oh man, I love that. But John Whitberg says that The Expanse was like the earlier years of like colonizing Mars. It's earlier technology, and where we are today with the SSP is way farther along. But The Expanse did depict like the earlier years. Like there's a lot of disclosure to that, and you're verifying that.
Absolutely, it's why I really like the show. One of the things that attracted me, other than seeing this thing with Mormons involved, and I started watching it during the first.
And having their ship ripped off, that was hilarious.
Yeah, right. I'll bring up that slide for a second. That's funny. Yeah, totally. Yeah, they get their ship ripped off. Where is it?
The giant keg.
Yeah. So this is in The Expanse. I don't have all the sequences. I had it from before when I did it, but 1 second.
It's a great show, and I love how they show the people born on Mars coming to Earth, and how like the gravity and everything else sucks them and makes them sick, and they have to take all sorts of augments just to be able to try to walk on the surface of the planet.
Oh right, yeah, because they never had the same gravity.
Right.
And they even use it as a torture, is by putting them in Earth gravity.
Yep.
Stuff. Yeah. So there's one there, but you're really right, and thank you for reminding me of that part, Arkeim, about the Mars part especially. When I saw in The Expanse when they do the stuff on Mars, like it was hard. It was hard to take in. A lot of how they were talking about like this future UN and Mars, and just of course with the mythology we know Mars being the war planet and etc. But the way they portrayed the corporate militancy of the Mars faction on The Expanse was really tight, I thought.
So that's realistic. That militaristic kind of like what they show in Starship Troopers. It kind of very indoctrinated military, like that's really like that.
It's so very synonymous, like right down like the architecture to the uniforms to the way you walk to the way you talk and what
like Hugo Boss on Mars uniforms.
Yeah, exactly. They're sexy, right? Like they're it's this very, because there's this very much this frontier mentality, which again Mormons lend to very well. Okay, people who went into the frontier, etc. So there's this frontier mentality of we can die at any moment. Everything's mission critical. There's no real sense of relaxing in an environment like that. You have a cessation of hostilities, and you can eat, but it's not like there's like, hey, let's go chill out for a while. in a place like that. Like
You're on a
it's-
pioneer. There's always work to be done, ma and pa.
Yeah. And so that part really resonated very strongly with me in the show. And the other characters that they showed were part of Mars. That female character,
Bobby.
Bobby, she's awesome, right? Like that is totally based off a prototype of what really is there. Like that Bobby character, totally.
She's
100%.
a super soldier.
Yeah.
And then their Mars military brass, they're kind of all a-holes like that.
Yeah.
It's
It's you know, it's very difficult because I didn't understand living my 3D life, also being the SSP. I couldn't understand a lot of the time why I had this sort of ruthless professional discipline and competency about myself that I wasn't really trained for in my 3D life. Like I was partially by the Mormons. The Mormons are really big at early indoctrination about organization, how to have meetings, how to like be planned, organized. Like they're really big on that. But
it's one thing to be
like I
structured.
understand security on a level I shouldn't understand security, for example, right? Like I'll look at things. I'm like, look at that security flaw. Look at that. I'm in a random place and I'm seeing security flaws in airports and what not, right?
That's training, guys.
That's my training, you know. And I actually sort of get off on things like that. Like when I lived in southern China, I mean, I'd actually I had to do regular trips into Hong Kong. And actually when we were talking about that sort of helped me piece together another thing, because here you are, you think you're working as an English teacher. And in fact, you know, you realize these companies are owned by like major military industrial complex contractors. Mm-hmm. Like the major centers, like they're just funneling hundreds of millions of dollars through these places. I was working for a place, it looked like it's just an innocent training institute for companies and schools and things like that. And in fact, they're laundering money through the Chinese oil company through to Hong Kong through our company in cash, right? And
right, because Hong Kong's a great gateway for China to get Western or U.S. dollars in particular.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
Right, and then they can convert it over there easily. And I think I have SSP memories even at that time of involvement with things that were going on in Hong Kong and that, but it was more like a dark astral version of Hong Kong that the activities, or that's what my memories seem to be of what I remember of it. It was really strange when I went into Hong Kong at times too. I would, like people noticed me. It was weird. Like imagine you're in New York, okay?
Well,
like
I mean, you're a tall white redhead guy, right?
No, but there's tons of people like that. There's Kiwis, there's Londoners, there's like
that's true in Hong Kong. That's right. In Hong Kong, it's much more Western than Beijing.
In comparison, right? It's very cosmopolitan. So I'm no special thing,
okay.
And I'm just walking around, and I'll walk. I love walking through Hong Kong. The energy is amazing, right?
Hong Kong's cool.
Feng Shui is amazing.
Yeah.
And I love architecture and all that. And I'm going through and I love walking through the financial district. But I don't know if it's just because I'm beaming or what, but I'll just have people like, whoa. And these are like other white business people and stuff, like checking me out. Like, I've had like old, like rich Hong Kong ladies stop me and like want to talk to me like I'm like an A-list celebrity. And it's not like this is aunties back in the Chinese countryside. Like this is a very accomplished lady. She can meet white people anytime she wants.
Well, is this thing? Dan, would you attribute that to they can see your energy signature? Like Jaden, he can see auras. He can see when people have like a strange aura, or that he can't see it for some reason. Or
I think it's because they remember him. I think it's because
this lady remembered me. She knew who I was.
They're aware of what's going on, and he's not.
Yeah, and it's like that scene in Fight Club where he doesn't know that he's the split personality, that all these people are having a relationship with his alter, and he doesn't know who these people are. That's me. All of a sudden, I'm like, I don't know why are you paying attention to me? Why are you wanting to talk to me like this? Because they're talking to Tyler Durden. They're thinking they're talking to Tyler Durden, and I'm not fucking Tyler Durden.
Now, does that lady, when she's approaching you, does she understand that that there's that split there, or does she think
so.
that
I
she
think
thinks
they're
she's talking
also
to the
sort of a
Tyler
little
Durden?
fan struck at the same time, where they're
Okay,
just
so they're
happy to
fanning
be able
out a
to
little
say that
bit.
they could.
Like, you're that guy on Mars who like took out all his spiders.
I
Blah
think
blah
she knew.
blah.
I think she knew like the things that I was doing with Hong Kong, and that,
Okay,
and she's
okay,
like,
the
"Oh,
Hong Kong scene.
so where are you living nowadays?" And it was really weird because my friend was with me. I was on holiday from the mainland during Golden Week, and then she sort of just like pushed my friend aside, not rudely, but she just sort of like
You're
totally
not
ignored
important.
her and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
started
that's very
talking to
that's
me.
very Asian. That's kind of Asian rich lady.
Yeah, yes.
I don't want you. I want this white boy.
Yeah, I
Talk
want
to
him.
me. I want him.
But it was really weird, and she was like, "Oh, and so where are you living now?" Like it was a good like 10 minutes. She wanted to talk to me, and it's a very odd thing. Okay, it's a very very odd thing, and I realized, and I put it back together, and I'm like, no, I know I was doing work in Hong Kong. I know that, and when I go through like my own personal dowsing things of things, like I've been used as an asset all across the board. It's not just Solar Warden or anything. I mean, is the Mormons, is this, is that, the other. In different countries I've lived, I've been
Good at your job, that's what they
for
do.
that country.
If you're good at your job, that's what they do. They use you over and over again. Like for instance, like I have alter. His name's Ryan Sterling, right? And so he worked as I guess you could say like a very secret agent in the 1950s, where he was working for the CIA as a time cop, and he was actually going to the future and back and stuff like that, and he was trying to protect. Oh, that's a whole other story. I don't want to go into it, but that same model of alter. So he lived another life on Centurion 5, where he was doing the same thing, and so basically what it was like the same personality, same model, but different memories, different experiences. So they can do that even. So even like an altar that you have that they use for stuff, that altar can even be used again. Like they can throw them into a new body, not remember, give them new memories, whatever, and then use them all over again. And that's what they'll do a lot of the times. If you're good at your job, like for instance, like, you know, I was a time cop in the 50s or whatever, they wanted to use me again. So they did. And that's just kind of how they work, is like, there's no reason not to. There's no reason to train someone over again. There's no reason to program someone over again. There's no it's like a lot of work. Like they sunk millions of dollars into all of us. Like, so why would they?
Well, you don't rebuild a U-Haul every time you use it and drive it across the country. You use it again and you drive it back and forth. It's the same idea. It's just reusing an asset over and over and over again. Trade it a million times, trade it a billion times, slice, dice, and Julianize it. You know, put it in this time dimension, this, how much more money can we make off of this one?
So we got a couple of questions from the chat. One person asked, do the Dragos have a religion? And this isn't, this is, yeah, they do. The dragons are the top of their society and are considered the spiritual leaders of their society. And there's different sects of the Draco religion. So there's other people that can talk about this better than me, but from what I understand, they worship AI, some of them. But then there are
the
others.
black goo.
Yeah,
right,
but
there's a split in the empire.
Yeah, and then some of them don't, and they're against it. So, but they still all get along, and they're not. It's not a civil war yet, but I think it could become one. And then another question is spiritual beliefs, if any, are in the breakaways. Most of the Germans worship Odin and practice a form of Norse mythology. But as we're talking about here, obviously there's Mormon breakaway colonies. And there's all sorts of different spiritual beliefs out there that people practice. So that's, I guess.
Well, let's remember too. I mean, it's a great component for social cohesion. That's why they're having religion in the first place. You know, you need to create a way of bonding a group of people. So we talk about ideologies. I think you can have military ideologies, but sometimes people want something deeper than that, and that's why I think the military often encourages people to have backgrounds in faith as well, because that sort of further solidifies it, right?
Yep. They like indoctrination. They're big.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I would say too, like, I don't know, but in my experience with my energy work in that, I mean, there's definitely a lot of the, reptilians, they practice dark shamanism and that as well, right? Like, we're not, there's spells being cast on people. There's voodoo and all of this type of shit. That this is another aspect.
I also think that, like,
spiritual practices of them.
I think weird part of their religion.
They're not purely scientific.
I think weird part of their religion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're the cattle. They pass things off onto us. They pass karma off onto us. They pass energy onto us. And then they take our energy and like, yeah, I don't claim to like know like the in and outs of the religion, which is kind of why I said take it with a grain of salt. Other people understand it better than me, but I do understand like on a deep level that they do have a religion, and in fact, their religion is connected to our Earth religion, like all the Abrahamic faiths and stuff like that. It's normally connected to these reptilians, and when you're sacrificing these children and stuff like that, it's normally to a reptilian entity. Even when you see Baal or Baphomet or whatever, and they don't appear as a reptilian, you see them as like a goat-headed being or something. Doesn't mean that doesn't mean anything. They're shapeshifters, as we know. So the one reason why they appear as a goat-headed being actually is because in the Middle Ages, people were supposed to sacrifice their first son, and they're supposed to make certain sacrifices, human sacrifices to these deities, and they started using goats instead in place. They thought it would be okay to use goats. So what they did to scare them is a goat-headed like deity showed up and said, "You're like killing my people. You're not supposed to kill my people. You're supposed to kill your people," to make people afraid of using a goat in place of a human, because then that thing will show up and like be mad at you. So like I think that we are a huge part of the religion actually.
It's always, that's interesting. I like that. It seems like it's always the same old story, whether you're going back to ancient Egypt or whatever. I'm not to also say that it's all dark, but a lot of it goes back to human sacrifice. The whole economy, to still the economy we have today with the maritime admiralty law, which is really a way of saying an alien abstract system being placed on us. It's still based on sacrifice, right? Human sacrifice. It's all based on assuming everybody's dead and then going from there. It's all this weird necromancy, and it's always a cult of death. This is, the signature hallmark. You don't need to look between the different faiths, and this one has got this name and that. What is it focused on? A lot of times you'll find sacrifice and death, and those ones are pretty clear about what they are. I was even seeing an article, like it was talking about looking at the cartels in Mexico and their religion with worshiping the death deity, and then working spells and that with the death deity for different types of protection and so on
to
and
be
so
bulletproof.
forth. Right?
Well,
So because they're evil means you don't have spirituality. Quite the opposite. I think they're simply using spirituality for personal gain.
And they're aware of the secret space programs and the time travel and the psychics and everything else. Tony Rodriguez was hired by a drug dealer to be a psychic for them, to be insurance for them.
Right.
So there's an underworld, and lots of different groups are aware of the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like one. Like people, like when people say like the Illuminati, like for me, it's kind of like the Montauk Project. Like it's not the correct term,
right?
But also it's not really wrong either. So let's just keep throwing it around because it's what works.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's not just like one monolith group. Like it's multiple groups, right? Like.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And they're always there, and they're trading and swapping you, and like, okay, yeah, well, what you got? It's like kids playing baseball cards. Okay, well, I got this guy, and you give me that, and there's trading assets back and forth, and
it's fucked up. I've been to some.
It's just business. They put it all under that rubric, right? It's just business, nothing personal.
I've been to these conventions that they do where they trade. They trade slaves.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they'll be sleeping, and they'll explain, like, "Oh yeah, when you wake them up, like, they'll be really docile, and they'll listen to whatever you have to say." And like, it's just crazy. Like, they actually have like And it's just crazy.
It's
Like,
like surprising when we have a bond market. We have a bond market, a slave bond market. Every single taxpayer is a slave bond. How's the bonds that governments raise are bonds on you as a presupposed pledge and slave to their dead bankrupt corporate system.
Multiple times over.
Many multiple times over, right? So I'm just trying to lend like the fact, like, and marry your concept right there of like they're slaves, and people will be like, no, it's too hard to believe that there's like that type of slavery that like you're discussing, or Tony Rodriguez or something. And it's like, why is it so difficult? If you actually understand how our system here works, that you can look up as laws and study, you will find that this is a system of slavery. It's voluntary slavery, very highly coerced and manipulated and indoctrinated slavery, but technically voluntary, right? Just tricking you into volunteering into the system. Just like they trick the people to volunteer into the SSP.
I gotta go for a second, but I'm still listening. I'm still here with you guys.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Jason says he wonders if people are called the goat to put them on a pedestal, and absolutely yes, that's that whole Baphomet cult religion of the Illuminati, and so that's totally buying into all of that. I was going to ask you, Dan, when you remember those spiders, I've heard that they get pretty large. I didn't realize they got quite that large. So when you're saying 12 feet across, is that like the legs like tip to
height,
tip, or
and
height?
Then even larger. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, huge.
And they're armored, and they're fast, and they're telepathic.
Yeah.
And then are they eight-legged?
The thing that I went through my head at the time in the experiences, and why I was so upset, is I think in our indoctrination, they're trying to tell us these are just a bunch of bugs, oversized bugs. But in reality, you realize they're actually sentient creatures, and that makes it very different, right? Like, oh my God.
They have a culture. They have a society.
They have a culture. They have an intelligence. They have a self-awareness and all these things. Like, this is so wrong. No matter who did what, where, when, why, it doesn't matter. It's killing another sentient being.
And then we describe them as spiders, but they're different because they have stingers, and they're telepathic, obviously, and they're bigger. Can you? I mean, just for me, it's huge. I mean, ever since listening to David Bowie and Spiders on Mars, that stuck with me forever when I heard it as like an 8-year-old. So.
Yeah, and it's that whole thing, Major Tom, that whole album, like just listen to the whole thing though, because it's so important to listen to it's a concept. The albums back in the day were a concept. It's a whole thing of magic he spun in that opera called that. And it's something else, right? This is ground control, right?
Yeah. He took you on a journey, and there's probably programming and all sorts of stuff. It's a very dissociative song. Major Tom, especially, is dissociative.
And I've also thought, in the past, it's just, I don't know. It's also, it'd be fun to do the David Bowie thing and get us SSP veterans and doing a music video to that, right? But showing us actually in our different missions and doing it to that music, and really seeing, and really I listen to that, and it's not like I just want to fantasize something, but is to appreciate the imagination and the very likely possibility that and much more occurred. And sometimes we really have to, give ourselves some kudos for what we went through.
I have to
I can say the fact that I actually knew David Bowie.
Oh,
and he was part of the Montauk Project, and he's a time soldier. I have to make myself food. I'm like really hungry, so that's why you're like fizzling behind me. But he was part of the Montauk Project, and he's very elite. From what I understand, his private normal lives are very nice. Even his life was like a rock. I mean, he was a rock star in his normal life. So he's really privileged, and I think he comes from royalty. I think he comes from some sort of space royalty or something like that. But yeah, I remember him, and I have a version. It was really good.
And I was getting a lot of Tavistock while you were saying that. You know, his link through was with Tavistock and all of that as well.
Yeah, and yeah, he when I went to this recording studio on Centurion 5, which is like a recording studio that like is connected to like time travel that's used for money laundering and stuff like that. They give you like a 10-year and then a 20-year tenure, and he showed up to say like congratulations to me. So like I know him, but the memories aren't super clear. But like yeah, he like showed you in all of his music. Like his last song, Black Star, that's like the craziest one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there is that whole weird thing between the Hollywood, the royalty, the musicians. You know, I think we were saying it earlier this week. I've done so many podcasts, so weird. I've never done this many in my life, but yeah, there was that weird thing with like when I was at that big concert with AC/DC and Rolling Stones, and AC/DC did like the Loosh Harvest right there with the crowd of 500,000 people at this concert.
What did that look like?
Stars One.
What did that look like? The whole Loosh harvesting that they're doing.
It was weird because all I noticed was because it was so they're doing this to like reopen Toronto after SARS 1 back in the early 2000s, and so they took out the former airport or airfield, and they had like 500,000 people. Anybody could go for free in it. They had everybody, like Justin Bieber, everything. It was like 12 hours of music for free, and the last acts were AC/DC and the Rolling Stones, and I was standing there and I was listening to AC/DC, and it was obviously it's amazing, like a concert. I've never really been to a concert like that size, and it's just like, wow, we're just rocking to AC/DC, and I could feel the energy of the crowd, but not just the energy of the crowd. I started to notice, and it was really weird, but I'm so sensitive to this. I noticed that the band was taking the energy of the crowd, and then like taking it in and then putting it back out in the crowd, and they're creating like this.
Yeah, that's normal. That's just making music, dude. There's nothing wrong with that.
But this was a little different. This is a little different than a regular one.
Travis Scott concerts are known for that too, right? That Loosh harvesting. So I
locked eyes with one of the people in the band, and then suddenly the distance between me and him, it just like, it's like we got brought together, and he noticed that I was watching, and it was like this weird like Loosh thing that was going on, and they're totally taking in the Loosh. I mean, I know, like he said, that is true to a certain extent. DJs know that kind of thing, but there was something very bizarre about this particular one, and at that particular moment in that song, and I was like, whoa. And I just like, I've had lots of experience with Loosh harvesting in different ways, so I'm really sensitive to it. And you realize, and you look at it like, wow, things are always going on. But yeah, I think all these people are involved in different ways. Not to say they're evil or anything. I think they're mostly like, I look at someone like Bowie, he just looks at himself like he's curious, and he's an intellectual and an artist. They have this weird way of like taking out the empathy side of it and then keeping it in this state of levity that is a very different type of consciousness. They're just sort of oblivious.
Yeah,
imagine people like eating a nice steak dinner in the middle of Auschwitz or something, and just being comfortable doing it. It's like that level of strange comfort they have with what they do. Anyhow.
Yeah, I almost wonder like how much he was aware on a surface level. Because he attested to the fact, like for instance, like it's historical music fact that he does not remember recording the entire album Aladdin Insane, which is attributed to drugs. But it makes me wonder if it was like an alter. You know what I mean? Because I actually have that happen. Like, like my girlfriend will be like, "Yeah, this movie we watched, da da da." Like, what? We watched that? She'll be like, "Yeah, we watched. You don't remember like this scene, this scene?" I'm like, "Nope." Like I'll alter out and totally forget things I do. So I almost wonder if that's what happened with one of his albums. And it makes me wonder, like, yeah, how how aware was he on a surface album level? Was like he like altering out, and that's how some of the content from like his lives in space got in his songs is not, because maybe not an aware level. For instance, with my music, I have a bunch of music that I made in like 2018 to like 2020. And I look back at it now, I'm like, holy shit, I'm talking about like all this stuff, like the secret space programs, like my altars, like it's all about it. But I didn't realize it as I was writing it. So it's like really strange how this stuff will come out and we don't realize it on a conscious level, what we're actually talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that I think sometimes too it's good to actually read testimony. Like I got some of the old stuff from like Michael Casbolt and stuff like this, and it's really fascinating when you read through it, because I see the amount of correlations I have with someone like him, just even like birth years. I think there's different batches of people who go through SSP2 depending on your birth year and regions and things like this. But I noticed I'm very close to a lot of the SSP people I actually get close to tend to be all people around my age, like mid to late 40s. Like a lot of the people, they're all in the same age group.
Big thing they do to fuck with us that I want to bring up for the first time in the show ever.
Do you have a mole on your forearm?
Mine?
On your left forearm? Like a mole right there on your left forearm? Because someone
Right
did like
here?
this. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got one right there. You've got one. Do you have one, ARKHEIM? Like on your left forearm? On your left forearm right after the crook of your
I don't
elbow?
see it.
Okay, just wondering. I have one. Dan has one. Okay.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It's just some people were saying like if you were born before the 90s, you're very likely to have this. I'm like, wait a second, I do, and all these people on the thread they did. It's kind of wild. Not everyone, but a lot of people. It was kind of interesting.
I do think there's like obviously there's all this time stuff and everything too, but I do think you get subject to the different technology at the time. I was coming online. It looks like a lot. There was things that happened earlier, like bullshit tonsillectomies and things like that they did to us as kids when we were 4 or 5. But and other things, obviously, the SRA started in the womb for me, right? Things like that.
Everybody in these programs starts.
I know, because my mom told me, right, that things happen. So, but yeah, I mean, I remember I have an extremely good memory. I can remember being an infant, literally, like I remember being in a baby chair and things like this, being fed. But I can remember it quite a bit. I have a good memory that way. And just as like I like working a lot with different metaphors. I think one of the things is some of us have very good memories too. The ones that tend to remember maybe just have excellent memories. Yeah. It's also why you're good at as a time travel asset. When you think about 12 Monkeys, Bruce Willis's character, the reason why they selected him was he had the ability to remember things still, and his brain wasn't scrambled when he went through time. So I think there's also this aspect of remembering is also one of the reasons why they're good candidates for things like this.
That makes sense.
Yeah, Audrey Walters says that there are people who are better able to go through time gates or portals and stargates and things like that, and not get what's known as void sickness.
It's a blessing and a curse to be one of those people. I can tell you that from personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one thing that I learned recently, kind of random, but not really. My birthday isn't May 16th, 1991. It's not even May 16th. I know my real birthday now. I'm a Leo.
What?
That makes sense.
Yeah,
you look like a Leo.
My birthday is August 5th, not May 16th. And which I feel weird saying that publicly. I almost feel like I should keep it secret, because your birthday is a really powerful thing. People don't realize that.
Sure.
It could be used against you for black magic. But yeah,
that's why your birth certificate is such a big deal.
Yeah, so I kind of realized, and it's kind of funny. Every year, the mile of is a humiliation ritual for me, because I'm the big music guy, and then I never get invited to play. It's during my birthday every year. Like it's during my birthday, like, yeah. So like I figured that out, and I think that's a huge thing. Like that's going on is a lot of people have their astrological signs in their birthdays completely wrong because these lives that they're living in are artificial, and an artificial birth does not count. Like, it's not the same thing. Like, when you were born into your body the first time as you, that's your birthday. Like, and for me, it was, August 5th, 1953.
Right. Yeah, there was weird things going on. I tied with my stuff that, like, I really loved when you were bringing up the stuff with the talented and gifted program, because that's how I realized, like, how I was inducted earlier before. So the year before my dad converted to the Mormons, I went through the testing for that program, but the testing wasn't just a simple, like, one-shot deal or something, and you just gave it to the whole class. They were pulling us out of class in small numbers, like 4 or 5 students at a time, and testing us. And it went on for months, I remember. It wasn't just like it happened once or twice. It was like a regular thing, being pulled out of class, going to this testing, and then, at the end, say, oh, and then they were putting it all under the auspices of the gifted program. And I really was expecting that I was going to go, because I was like, yeah, I'm always being pulled out for this and everything. So I'm going to be going. And then they turned around and said, not everyone was selected, but don't worry, we're going to keep an eye on you. And it was this really creepy thing before they let us go back into the classroom. Right?
That's creepy shit. I got my eye on you. It's like, yeah.
Like, that's how good my memory is, though. I remember back when I was 7 years old, and literally that conversation. I remember, like, where it was and all these details to it. But, and then it's interesting. I think that it wasn't an accident that my dad ended up converting to Mormonism a year later or so, and then us with it, because this person I was talking to earlier, she was advised, as being part in the programs, that if she joined the Mormons, she would be protected, that there would be protection offered to her if she joined them.
Did your family's financial situation improve drastically after joining at all?
No, it
no
didn't.
Perks?
No perks that way. That's what was weird, right? Like, the Mormons were really, they could be pretty uppity about things. Like, my dad was a steel worker, unionized. Like, he got paid decent money, but he wasn't one of the people who had, like, his own business, and he wasn't like, the chief of police or an accountant. So, they're very big on ranking people based on this, right? Plus, it was the 80s. Everybody was hyper materialistic. But I know that, like, my dad's side is multi-generational SRA abuse in that, right? Like, he was born on a military base in Germany under the Royal Air Force. My grandfather was in the Royal Air Force, and so on and so forth, right? So there's that direct.
You're ticking off the boxes. You've got, like, military background, got inducted in the Mormon Church, all these things.
Right,
Talented
and then,
and gifted
it
program.
happens to be that I'm, and the gifted program. Then that was weird. I did background research on it in this place I was taken. I had a couple of photos just so people could see, but it's a hospital that got destroyed since. But they had a lot of underground tunnels between all the buildings on this large campus, and it had all these underground tunnels in that. And it was conducted by this guy we called it the Ontario Child Health Study. It was this big, comprehensive, first of its kind study from this psychiatrist who's working for the behavioral science department at the university.
All those guys, all the psychiatrist guys that created our modern psychiatry were like creeps.
Yeah,
like, these are the guys that were like literally like assaulting kids and stuff like that.
We're
trying to see how they respond to it. Look, we're trying to learn about humanity, and like a lot of shit that is considered like mental health, like gospel, like was literally like put into society by like crazy, demented fucking people.
Well, see, the thing is, my sister remembers this guy too, because he ended up being the director of an alternative high school that she ended up going to years later. This guy had his fingers in everything, and he was trained at Queen's University, which is an Ivy League in Ontario that's connected to McGill University, and of course, Tavistock and the CIA with that, right?
Interesting. We should
So
do a show on Tavistock because I haven't talked about it that much.
there's a lot with Tavistock.
I know-
That
I know
whole
you're gonna-
axis is
I
right
know
there, right? So I'm in Hamilton. There's just that whole line UT. You got Lake Ontario there. That's a whole big giant underground base underneath
Mhm.
that thing. I mean, it's highly, highly organized. Canada has a huge role in a lot of these things.
Kamloops I've heard about as well as McGill.
Yeah, so yeah, you have McGill is in Montreal, and then Kamloops is in BC. When I was living out in the interior here in British Columbia for a while, I was a couple hundred miles from Nelson. You may have heard of Nelson. That's where they have the big cloning facility. It's a giant hippie town.
Is that what Donald Marshall's talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I got from my dowsing, like, I don't know, sometimes my higher self's just like, I'm telling you something now, get ready, and they're like, okay, and like spelling everything out for me. But it's like, yeah, got cloned, got lots of them out there. Well, I don't talk about this too easily. I hate sharing some of that stuff, but I want to confirm some of the data points other people have come up with and realize that being part of the same things.
Well, one thing I want to bring up is I have to get going.
For sure, of course.
I have a show with Laura Eisenhower immediately after this show on the channel New Earth Light Brigade. It is a show that I'm doing with Audrey Walters.
Yeah.
Who is a very knowledgeable individual when it comes to the secret space programming and just what the galactic truth is, I guess. I don't know how else to say it. And obviously, Laura Eisenhower is a big deal in our community. And we'll probably have her on the channel eventually, but I just thought it would make great content for kind of New Earth Light Brigade, which is focusing more on the future than past testimony, which isn't necessarily something we don't ever do here. But as you know, with YouTube, it's good to have more, multiple pots in the kettle, so to speak, or pots on the fire or whatever, because they delete channels and stuff like that all the time. So it's just another channel, and you guys can help out by, it's literally in the description of this video. So you can go over there, watch the video. It's coming up right after this. And please subscribe to that channel. And also, there's probably some of you who haven't subscribed to this channel. So if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Please like. It helps out a lot. And also, not to be a shameless grifter, but I do need to eat food, and I do this as my job now. So if you feel like donating, I'm going to put it on the screen here. It's pretty easy to do. Just boss sounds or ARKHEIM'S on PayPal.me. But yeah, and then Dan, is there anything else you want to say before you go? Where can people get a hold of you?
No, yeah, for sure. Well, I'm always delaying. I'm just trying to put my website together this week. It's been a nightmare, but I just tell people to contact me through Facebook. Usually, that's the easiest at the moment. I don't like doing email. Sometimes I miss it. Easier to do it on Facebook, especially if I see that you have friends. We have mutual friends with other people in the community. It makes me a little bit more comfortable about accepting certain friend requests. I do try to look at a background check. I just let it down for 2 seconds the other day, and somebody managed to get $20 out of me.
Crazy emails from people, like people who are like genuinely like mentally disturbed. So I can understand why you. Like some people are like
asking a little bit of a filter there.
How do I answer this question? This person has problems. But yeah, so it is kind of good to have a bit of a vetting process. Facebook kind of gives you that, even though it's a really terrible app. There's some good things about it. Otherwise, we wouldn't use it, right?
Yeah, and it's just a bit universal and it works easily. So that's the easiest. It's my name here. You'll see it, Nanaimo, BC, or Trent University. And just hit me up there. I've had a lot recently, so if I don't get back right away, it's because of that. And I got things going on in my 3D life like everyone else. So we do get busy. We do have other family and friends we got to deal with, and sometimes it can't be right away. But I just wanted to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to talk about that today.
We'd love to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back, and I am going to have to wrap things up because
no, for sure. You got to get going. I got to get moving on too.
Please, everybody, come over to the chat. Like I said, it's in the description. Come on, hang out with me and Laura and Audrey in like 5 minutes. See you guys later, right. And thank you so much, everybody, for supporting our channel. We appreciate you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah.